Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the chance to moderate this session. My name is Albert Fox-Cahn. I'm the Executive Director of the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. And with me today are the real experts on this topic. So Matt is just a force to be reckoned with in privacy space, especially here in New York. Founder of Crypto Harlem, currently at the Ford Foundation. Peter, I think the title is General Counsel, but tell me if I'm wrong, at Access Now, dealing with these issues around the world. And hopefully our colleague Nash will be with us shortly just to round out the panel. But really, we wanted to have this topic covered today because this is always been a vital issue. But in the age of remote legal work and the age of remote work, this is an indispensable part of protecting the people we serve in nonprofits and protecting the movements we're trying to advance as activists. And so with that, I was hoping just to kick it off with, just what is the state of play? What are people generally doing right when it comes to securing communications, and what are they generally getting wrong? And maybe kick it to Matt first and then Peter.
Oof. What are people getting right and what are people getting wrong in their general communications? Is that the question?
Just like, where do you think the state of play is today? When if thinking on a scale of like 1 to 10, like 1 being worst case scenario where everyone's like, I'll put everything out in the open, and 10 being everyone is, having the most hardened sort of communications plan you can imagine and using the most intense encryption available. Where do you think like NGOs and legal service providers generally are? Oh, and I see Nash. Nash,
oh, hey, Nash.
welcome.
Okay, hello.
Cool. And Nash is an incredible organizer with the Electronic Frontier Foundation.
Cool. Well, let me kick it off. I just want to say thank you to Albert. Thank you to formally, okay, let's do it. So, I think that most legal professionals use business software that we're trained to use depending on, what your generation of technology was. And a lot of that has like some built-in protection. So we're like, probably okay, like 5. And the problem is that our clients, the people we work with, NGOs, nonprofits, civil society actors, they're always operating at like a much lower number because they don't have, business software tends to have built-in protections that are like, okay. Not only are they're not using technology has built-in protections, but they have unique risk and threats that they face regardless. Whether it's like, who are your donors or who, details about board meetings to specific things based on if you're doing like any, you're doing good work, you're pushing against the status quo, it's going to push back. And, especially now that we're all dealing with a global pandemic, that's pushback is going to be digital and it's going to hurt. So we end up in this complicated situation where we all inherit a very low setting. So I would say, unfortunately, you're operating at a disadvantage, handicap of 2, maybe 3. It's Friday, maybe a 3.
And then Peter, I'll hand it over to you next. And Nash, the question is just, what is the state of play right now? Where are we starting off in terms of the general level of awareness, and what are people, are people generally doing things well or badly? But Peter, what's your take?
Sure. I think it varies by communities, and we look globally, and there's a lot of differences. Different communities tend to use, the same suite of apps and services, and those will have, one level of security safeguards that they might employ. But for the most part, I think account compromise is one of the main issues that we work on in our digital security helpline, and accounts are compromised constantly. If people don't use multi-factor authentication, if people are a little bit sloppy with the passphrases and password management and login info, and some fairly low level, low-hanging fruit exploits there, put a lot of people at risk, unnecessarily. So, much more can be done, I think, with our various accounts that we all have for both social and professional. As far as lawyers and lawyering, I think the bigger firms will have IT departments, and as Matt said, they'll have enterprise software with some policies and protocols, hopefully, that folks mostly follow. I think smaller solo practitioners will have more trouble, might rely more on mobile devices and like consumer software and not really optimize that for security. We just published this op-ed around attorneys encrypting and actually have some hard numbers that less than half of US lawyers surveyed use file encryption, full disk encryption, encrypt their drives, and only 38% used email encryption. And as others can tell you, email was designed more as a postcard, more as a an open standard rather than something that would really maximize and prioritize security or confidentiality. So especially as lawyers with our ethical duties to protect client confidentiality, it's really incumbent on us to level up a bit and lay out an extra layer of both security and tech and in process.
And Nash, what about you? Where do you think the status quo is?
There's certainly room for growth, and they're really folks are kind of across the board. There's no style, there's no single answer, and really there necessarily shouldn't be one single answer. Doing what's necessary should be that answer, right? But you can't protect yourself from every single potentiality and every single potential attack. It's a recipe for failure, right? It's really a matter of identifying what are the most likely threats that you are likely to face, and what should you be doing, and also who's impacted by the choices that your organization makes, right? And doing what is necessary to protect your organization and the folks that are impacted by your work from that likelihood, and recognizing that there's no perfect solution. It's always going to be a balance between time and resources and labor and what your threats are, and making sure that for each organization they're making the appropriate choices based off of what resources that they have available to them, and what the likelihood and potentiality are of certain attacks, and the harm that would happen if they were susceptible to those attacks. I think over the last years we've seen in a lot of the smaller organizations, I think have been nimble in using resources like Proton Mail, for instance, in order to have some level of better protection than email that's been in the clear text. I think across the board, many of us have started adopting more secure communications in our personal lives as well as in our professional communications. Like Signal's made it really easy for us to use that level of end-to-end encryption for one-to-one communications. But there's, I would say, by and large, and particularly in my experience within the legal community, there's still a large room for growth, and there's a large room for really understanding all of the scope of potential threats.
Yeah, and I think that threat modeling component is going to be key, and we're going to get back to that in just a second. But before we get to that, and once again, just want to invite everyone to, if you feel comfortable, if you're able to if you're in a place that allows it, to turn on your video, and please to share your questions, your comments in the chat, because we know that everyone comes to this with different levels of expertise, different levels of understanding, and we want to make sure that we're offering you the answers that are most relevant to what you're experiencing every single day. Before we get to the threat modeling, I want to just dwell on this, and this is a little bit of a scary point, especially right before heading into the weekend, but thinking about the scale of the ramifications here. Why are we talking about it? The title of this talk was A Duty to Encrypt. Peter mentioned a legal duty as attorneys, a professional responsibility duty, but there's also a moral duty more broadly. And just when we talk about something on that scale, I think it's helpful just to dwell a bit on the scale of what we're protecting against. So maybe Peter, you could, since you flagged that in your answer, talk a bit about the scale of what we're fending off here.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, in my day job at Access Now, we are driven to defend and extend the digital rights of users at risk and at-risk communities and individuals. So we're talking about human rights defenders, civil rights activists, journalists, often professional or independent, yeah, these are folks who really don't often have strong institutional backing, they're either working on their own or with, loose coalitions, often depending on, the trust of confidants. If you're a journalist, it's your sources, folks that you go back to. If you're working as an activist within a community, those the trust bonds, especially if you're working on something that the government, isn't so pleased with, are really key. And, a lot of the attacks that we see when people's phones are compromised, the adversaries will take very intimate photos and videos off those phones. There's a couple cases, I think, with Khadija Ismailova, a journalist, as well as Fouad from Morocco. That's a case that we just highlighted on our website and in our submission in this current lawsuit that WhatsApp's bringing against NSO Group in California. These cases were of journalists who saw their intimate videos and photos spread over the internet by their adversaries in a kind of a tarnishing campaign. So this is like intensely personal subject matter, right? And something that's really sensitive to the individual that's being exposed in an attempt to attack them, often for what they do professionally and what they've organized their life and their community to achieve, which is social justice and democracy and progress. And so I think it's these attacks can really hurt most because they end up isolating the individual or ostracizing you and cutting you off from, if you're a journalist, those that you're trying to talk to, but also even friends and family. In a lot of cases, maybe you're in the diaspora, they just won't want to risk reaching out and contacting you. So it's intensely isolating to individuals in a way that can kind of poison the well of a whole community.
Fabulous. I see that we're starting to have questions that are coming in. Please keep them coming. We'll keep a running list as well. But Matt, I saw you you raised your hand.
I raised my thumb because these questions are great. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk about, what is the risk that we're facing and what are the costs that we have. And, what I tend to do is I'll just go over to WikiLeaks website, and they still have the Sony hack emails there. And you'll see on the bottom, it's this long blurb like, "Hi, I'm whatever Esquire. I paid a lot of money so I can go to law school and pass a bar. And these communications are encrypted and secure, and you'll be legally viable, blah, blah, blah." But like, that's a legal protection that hackers don't care about. I'm a computer hacker. Hackers come from all over the world, and that little blurb means nothing. And so, yeah, I mean, like, the risk is that our everything that we do to do our work, right, and protect the nonprofit or protect the organization next to us is in the public. And, the American Bar Association says, like, we have an ethical duty to encrypt and secure communications. But I was speaking at this event with for the Virginia Bar in Virginia, and with the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. It was a defense lawyer thing, but prosecutors, it's cool. Like, I don't hate you, but defense, you're my jam. So at the end of the day, at that event, like, we talked about how not only do we have this confidentiality duty, but the fact that someone's seeking legal protections, you have a duty to keep that secure and safe. Like, that doesn't need to be known. And that means that person, maybe if they email you with a from that is their name, maybe they should use a different account to write you. Like, that's a very